Welcome to the British Chamber of Commerce Singapore's podcast channel. We're excited to bring you season 3 of new episodes featuring in-depth content across Singapore, ASEAN and the United Kingdom. We've had some extraordinary guests on our channel, including Formula One's Claire Williams.
I'm a firm believer that any great team, any successful team has a great culture flowing through it. You aren't successful if you don't. So we put a lot of work into this.
Renowned mountaineer Kenton Cool.
There, 2019, there with a client, a big storm came in and literally destroyed Camp 2. And I've got some video footage of Sherpas like trying to hold on to the tent fabric as it blows away. And
the Royal Navy's Commodore Steve Morehouse, commander of the UK Carrier Strike Group.
The squadron of F-35 aircraft we have on board is a Royal Air Force squadron, and the personnel there are drawn from both the Navy and the Air Force. So, what better way of showing just the efficiency and the joined-up nature that we now have.
And distinguished Sky News anchor Jeremy Thompson.
We had 2 little vans with satellite links, and we leapfrogged up the road to Pristina, the capital, throughout that first day, with non-stop coverage from basically inside a war zone.
We also sit down with the likes of TikTok, Twitch and Twitter and continue to bring you conversations around business and trade, leadership and people, sustainability, sports and arts and much, much more. Thank you, as always, for your support and we hope you enjoy this podcast.
Hi everyone, I'm Daisy and welcome to our Everything You Wanted to Know but Was Too Afraid to Ask podcast from the British Chamber of Commerce ICT Committee. Each episode will be joined by a technology expert who will be demystifying everyday technology concepts, those little things we wish we knew a bit more about. I'm excited to be introducing Deepika Nikhilender, Senior Vice President at Xaxis APAC, a WPP company. Over the last 20 plus years, Deepika has gained experience across APAC region in marketing and communications domain, working in multiple categories with over 100 brands. She has been seen as a maven and a veteran in the media industry, and she has garnered a deep knowledge of APAC's markets, consumer culture, and diverse marketing environments. With a deep foundation in marketing science, data and communication strategy, and with a huge number of industry awards in media and technology, there is no better person to be demystifying our concept today. And our concept today is cookies. So welcome, Deepika.
Thank you, Daisy. Thank you for having me here.
No, it's completely our pleasure. Now, what we want to start with to make sure we're all on the same page is really just to tell us exactly what cookies are and why we see them every time we open our browsers.
Great. So clearly you're not talking about the yummy cookies that we'd like to pick out of the jar. But let me spend a few minutes sharing what a cookie is in our world, which is the digital marketing world. So a cookie is a term that's given to a text file that grabs the needed information to identify you, the user, a user who's engaging with the browser and obviously the internet. So it's a type of a file that is a message that's given to a web browser, which examples of which are Chrome, Safari, Firefox, etc., by a web server. So when you get onto a website that's using cookies, a cookie is sent to your browser, which then stores the information about you for later use. So that the next time you go to the same website, and it can be a publisher, it could be even your university website or your company website, the browser then picks up that cookie and sends it to the web server. So the message is sent each time the browser requests a page from the server. Now, typically a web server has no memory of its own. So the website that hosts these cookies, which you're visiting, tends to transfer that cookie file of the browser onto your computer's hard disk. And that's why many of you might see cookies stored on your hard drive. And that enables the site to remember who you are and the preferences that you have. The main purpose of a cookie is to identify the users so that they can track your behaviors, customize your web experience, or even save the site login information for you. And I'm sure quite often you notice that when you go back to a site, the previously inputted information is still there, and you wonder, oh, it's already there, so I don't have to fill much. That's perhaps because the site has captured it and hasn't cleared it for you. In case you're wondering what type of information a cookie can hold, most cookies hold at a minimum the website's name and an ID for you, and it's a unique ID. So Daisy, you will have a different ID, I will have a different ID, so it knows very clearly that it's a different person who is coming in, and that's what we call an identifier. But for some websites, it can also include other information in the cookie, and it stores all of that in your computer. So for example, it could be the amount of time you spend on that website, the links that you have clicked on while you were on that website, the preferences that you have chosen as you were there, the recording of which pages you visited in the past. And perhaps if you were on an e-commerce site, it could even be the items that you've put in a shopping basket and perhaps not pushed it through to a transaction. So that's the amount of information a cookie is capable of holding.
Gosh, that's a lot of information. It does make our lives easier, though, as you've pointed out. So it's about, so you've mentioned e-commerce, you've mentioned, some brands that might use it, publishers. So, and you've also mentioned that the cookies store in different places. Is that right? So some on the hard drive, some on the web pages. Could you give us a bit more information about kind of different types of cookies, different companies might use?
Firstly, yes, the cookie can be stored at different places, but the easiest, as I mentioned, is because the server doesn't store it, the browser stores it, right? And so a Chrome, which is very popular in Asia, will store those cookies so that it knows who's that user who's coming back to that web page. So yes, there are lots of different types of cookies. Very simply, I'm just going to explain it in the two buckets that we make reference to it often. One is called the session cookies, which are also known as temporary cookies. They help the websites recognize the users and the information provided when they navigate through a website. The session cookies will retain the information about the user's activities for as long as they are on the website. So let's take here, for an example, bbc.com. I get onto it and there'll be a session cookie that will fire, and it'll know exactly which are the pages that Daisy is looking at, which are the sections within BBC that you're browsing, you're consuming, how much time you're spending with it. And once that web browser is closed, the cookies are then deleted. That these are commonly used on both, certain publishers, shopping websites, e-commerce websites, and so on. So these are called session cookies. And then there are the permanent cookies, which are also called persistent cookies, which remain in operation even after the web browser is closed. So for example, they can remember your login details, your passwords, so that the web users don't need to keep on re-entering them every time you come back to that site. And these are typically, again, with if you recollect Facebook, for instance, right? I mean, the social media sites, if you were asked to, input your name and user ID and password every time, it would really bother you. But you'll notice most of the time, it remembers you. So the experience with it is pretty easy, pretty simple, and doesn't annoy you. Then there are first-party cookies, which are directly created by the website that you're using. So that's another very, commonly used cookie in our world, the first-party cookie, which is owned by a publisher or a brand. And these are created by the website itself. And then there are third-party cookies, which are generated by websites that are different from the web page users that you're currently surfing. So they could be someone outside of who you are engaging with. Typically, that's done when people want to track you, or they want to target you, or they want to retarget you, or they want to serve you an ad on it, which is coming at the back of understanding who you are. So if they find out that, okay, Daisy is a woman, and she is in this location, and she is approximately this age, let me serve a relevant advertising message to her. Now, that's another use case for a cookie. But one thing that I think, irrespective of the number of types of cookies that there are, I think it's important that we also know that there are some rules, and especially more so those that were born in the last few years. What I can simply say are the laws on the cookies, right? Is that the websites have to tell the people who engage with them that the cookies are there. You need to be told and what cookies are and what those cookies are going to be used for, explaining to people what the cookies are doing and why they're doing what they're doing, and get their users' consent to store that cookie on their device, right? This is a new development in the recent month when it comes to laws around cookies, governance, and so on.
Makes a lot of sense. So that personal protection.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So just on that personal protection then, should I be allowing all these cookies? Should I accept every time it pops up on my screen?
So I think it's not a very straightforward answer, because privacy is a very personal choice. You do need to, however, be aware that some companies simply won't let you use their website if you don't accept cookies, right? And it's happening quite often a lot nowadays, and particularly since the introduction of a very, I think a big, significant, law and governance that was passed in EMEA, Europe, for instance, which is called GDPR. The Global Data Protection Act, actually, which the EU markets came together and formed and shaped. And there's some very heavy fines that go with it, by the way, if you don't follow some of the GDPR laws. So when that came about, some of the websites will no longer give you access to their content without the cookie permission. And it's generally because some websites simply won't work as intended without that cookie. But for most part, you'll still be able to access majority of that content without or content that's available on the internet without accepting the cookies. So it's not like everybody asks for it. It's different situations, different scenarios, that there are upsides to accepting cookies, of course. So for example, you'll get a very tailored experience with more relevant content. So it's usually worth accepting cookies, unless you're very fearful of privacy and very particular about it and say, I don't want to get anybody to know who I am, where I am, how old I am, what's my gender. I just don't want that. Then, of course, that's a personal choice one can make. So there are two situations I would say everybody must exercise some caution before you accept cookies. Is when the notification pops up, if you want to be informed, read about it. And you need to understand that company is perhaps just gathering some bits of information from you. And if there is something that you don't recognize, like a name of a party that's collecting cookies that you don't recognize, you don't feel comfortable, then it's okay to decline it, But if, let's say, I'm onto a Unilever website and Unilever's collecting it, and you feel that I'm okay with, because a company of this stature will make responsible use of my data, then it's okay. Also, the other thing would be if there is registered information about you, like your email, personal information that you don't want it to be, stored. Again, you don't need to accept it. It's completely your choice. And the last caution I would say is if there's a non-secured website, and typically that is a website that doesn't have a lock, icon next to it, and it typically happens when you're using public Wi-Fi in an airport and so on, then what is very common is what we call cookie stealing. And when someone picks up your cookie session and then starts to log into the websites that you've been to in the past, few days or a week also, then that's dangerous. So these would be some of the, cautionary areas I would highlight to respond to that question. Should you be accepting? So there are good parts to it, but there are also things that you need to be, I think, aware of, so that you don't be in any way taken aback by some fraudulent use of that data that you've given them.
Absolutely, it makes so much sense. Yeah, and you just describing it there gives us more awareness. So yeah, thank you very much. In some of the research that you've done and some of the interviews that you've given recently, Deepika, you've talked a bit about depreciation of third-party cookies. So can you give us a bit more information on what that means?
Of course, yeah. So as I explained in the first question, responding to your first question, the third-party cookie is something that a partner or an owner puts in, which is not that website. So it's somebody outside of the website that you are engaging with. This is going to be deprecated, as in allowing this is going to be deprecated very soon. And this is actually going to shake the digital marketing ecosystem to a very significant level. And the genesis of this comes from the demand for consumer privacy. And the major, it's one of the major reasons why some of the browsers like Chrome and Safari and all are phasing this third-party cookie out. So back in Jan 2020, Google announced that they will deprecate this third-party cookie over the next 2 years. Then in June of the same year, we had Apple announcing that it's going to limit the use of its mobile device identifier, or what we call the ID, what they call IDFA, which stands for Identifier for Advertisers. And it only exists in the iOS apps. Before which Firefox and Safari were actually already blocking the cookies. But it didn't become a very big drama because the usage of Firefox and Safari is very limited in the world. It's tiny, especially in Asia. So you didn't see much chatter about it. But when Chrome, which is a very major browser in Asia, it's as much as 68-70% market share. So obviously, when Chrome said that, coming obviously from Google, everybody started wondering, oh, what are we going to do? How's it going to affect us? And what is the alternative to that? Because digital advertisers have long used this cookie as an identifier to do a lot of the tasks needed. So to target somebody, to measure, to personalize that campaign for you, all of this has been the biggest use case of a particular third-party cookie. So when the news came that it's deprecating, and it comes from Google, which is a majority player in our industry, obviously it has shaken the industry, and we are all, very actively preparing for its demise. And we call it the cookie crumbling, or another word for it is the cookie apocalypse. So that's how we are preparing for it.
That's really interesting, Deepika. So will personalization still be possible, in a world where there are less cookies?
Absolutely, it's still possible. But before that, I think I would like to highlight that one thing for sure that will happen in a cookieless world is that the consumer's privacy will be more respected. Consumers will have control over what they want to see, who they want to give permissions to about for the data that is being collected about them. And brands will have to respect that. They will definitely, merge their various strategies to be able to, respect that privacy requirement. The benefit, though, of accepting cookies will come in the form of improved user experience. Not only will the cookies help the pages load faster, but they will also tailor the advertisements, the messages, create a very smooth and effortless authentication process, and maintain those site preferences for repeated visits. So if we accept some of those cookies, definitely personalization will still be possible. And to my point earlier, you can reject those that you don't feel comfortable with. But if you accept those that are coming from brands, you will be quite surely seeing a customized or tailored experience because of the data that they've collected from you. So in respect to that, what brands will need to do is they will need to rethink and craft their data strategies for this whole new scenario where they're going to have a world of no third-party cookies. So they will need to optimize, they will need to innovate so that they can deliver the customer experience off the back of this highly improved new first-party data strategy, which comes from the cookies that I spoke about earlier, which will now more than ever before become extremely pertinent to delivering those love experiences that you want from a brand. So they will come up with new ways to target, they will come up with new ways to learn about you without being intrusive and without you feeling that you're being creepily followed in any way. So to future-proof for many of such GDPR type of regulations, restrictions. In fact, here in Singapore, we have personal data protection laws, all of that. So all brands and all the publishers will all have to adhere to those laws and build a really robust data strategy for themselves so that they can keep that customer happy, delighted, and ensure that they have a really pleasant experience when they come onto their websites or their mobile apps.
Brilliant. Well, sounds like it's all moving in a very interesting direction, both for the brands and for the technologists behind it all, and reassuring to hear from a consumer perspective. So I just can't thank you enough, Deepika, for your time and your expertise. You've certainly ticked off what we set out to achieve in this 15 minutes, which is demystify the concept of cookies. So really, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Daisy. It's been a pleasure.
And thank you everyone for listening. We'll be continuing to demystify other technology concepts throughout this series, and I hope to see you at the next episode.
Thank you for tuning into this episode of the British Chambers Podcast. Before you go, don't forget to subscribe, and why not leave us a rating and review on Spotify, Apple, Google, and the other podcast platforms. For more information, please visit our website at www.britcham.org.sg and tune in next time for a brand new episode.